I'm going to talk to you this weekend. I'm actually stepping out of the series, Old School, because I want to speak to you from an angle of what I believe we need to remember. Every 2 or 3 years, I will talk about this, but I'm bringing it from an angle that I feel like is fresh and from the Spirit of God today. Raise your hand if you want a fresh word from God, okay? And I know that. This last week, I was invited to a birthday party of a man who turned 40 years old. And man, it was a lot of celebration. When I pulled up, it was just before the surprise of this pastor named Josh. And so I was there, and it was getting ready to get lit. But I don't mean with alcohol. I'm just talking about we were going to have a good time. And but while I was out there, a man, a very distinguished man, the kind of man, classy, but cool. But he's the kind of guy that goes up to you like this. Not the kind that goes to you like this. So he ran over to me and he put his arms around me. This is in front of everybody. And he just lost it. So now he's crying uncontrollably and hugging me in front of everyone. I never minded it, but I didn't know what was going on. Everybody else stopped their position of surprise, and they just looked over, and it was about that time because I was facing them, and I could tell they all knew what was going on, but I was the only one that didn't. This very successful businessman was hurting. And it's not a man who goes to this church. It's not even a man who lives in our cities. But when it was done, someone who I don't even know, I still don't even know who it is, pulled me to the side and said, "Do you know what's wrong with Jay?" And I said, "No." They said, "His grandson is 3 years old and he drowned this week." And so for the rest of the evening, I was at this party, but all I could think about was the pain. It was really amazing to see that those two dynamics could be happening in the same room. And then I thought of the church. This is exactly the way that it is. Some people are in pain right now, and some people it's like life is a party. It's cyclical. It's recurring. Things move around. The last time I'd seen this man, he was just like telling me about his grandkids. So I think it's important that we understand the big picture of church. Now, if I were to talk about church, I could talk about things that are very important according to the Word, like discipleship and equipping people, and we have to do that as a church. In fact, if I were to talk about a lot of things, I could talk about how we want to grow larger and smaller at the same time to get people around the Word to learn the Word. I could talk about that. But today, I may not be talking about the most important thing, but it could be. I want to talk to you today about life when we're together, whether it's in a small room or a larger room, because some are in pain and some are not, and some have been discipled and some have not. Some get phone calls and some do not. Romans 12:15 says, "Laugh with your happy friends when they're happy and share tears when they're down." Hebrews says it this way, "Let us not give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as we see the day approaching." Years ago when I was called into the ministry, I didn't want to do it. I wanted to do a lot of other things. But one day, I came to resolve, and certainly much more rest, when I felt like the Lord spoke to me. I wrote it in the back of my Bible, and it was like, okay, I can do this. Because before, I didn't think I could, and there's still times where I don't think I'm good at this. But there is one thing that I can do, and so can you. I wrote it in the back of my Bible, and it said, "Rick, your calling is simply to encourage other people." Well, it was some months after that when I was in a cabin somewhere praying about things. I said, "Lord, why do you want me to do this so much?" And it's like I heard it. I didn't hear an audible voice, but I know He said, "Because my people are so discouraged. Encourage them." And if you look at the original design of the early church in the book of Acts chapter 2 and verse 46, it says, "Every day they continue to meet together in the temple courts. Could you look here for a minute? I love you. I love this church. But I don't want to be around you every day. Every day? How could this be? Well, let's look in. They broke bread in their homes and they ate together, because you got to have red beans and rice somewhere to build a church. And boudin. Anybody like boudin? And with glad, everybody say glad, and sincere hearts. In other words, not just faking it every day. They were praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. Of course they were. What was the results though? And the Lord added to their number daily. What? What was he adding? Those who were being saved. It's like right now we are at church. Some of you have the mindset that you're at church right now. And that's not a bad mindset, but don't let it hold you down, because church starts at a certain time and then it's over at a certain time. So then you think you leave church. But you don't leave the church. This is just one component of what we do. It's like I'm a dad, so when I was raising my kids, they've all left me now, but when I was raising my kids, we would have dinner at night. Now we still have family night. They all come in. They're all married now. They come in and we have family night. And when I'm having dinner with my family, I'm being a father then, but it's just one component of being a father. I'm a father right now. So you're at church, but this is just one component of being a church. So from the big scope of things, and this is what I want to zero in on two parts of this. Number one, the importance of people who do not know the Lord. And number two, the importance of this congregational meeting. Because the early church, they met in homes, but they met in the temple courts. They had celebration times where they all came together, and then they broke out into relationships. But what's the main purpose of it? In Proverbs chapter 11 and verse 30, it says, "He who wins souls is wise." I don't want you to raise your hand on this, but I just want to ask you, how many people have you won to the Lord this year? Well, if you haven't, it's not because you're mean or wicked. It's just you've forgotten the importance of who you are. Once you give your heart to the Lord, there is nothing more important that you will ever do after that than win someone to Christ. So, my pastor who put this inside of me, I'm ate up with it. It's the reason why we keep expanding as a church. We're not thinking about who's won, who's met the Lord. Raise your hand if you know Jesus in here. Come on, look. I thank God for that. But what about the next one? Well, I get this from my pastor. My pastor wrote a book, 25 lines around. And you don't have to read it because they don't even have any more copies left to sell. So I'm just going to tell you what it is. 25 lines around. What he did is he broke out the whole globe, the population on earth. At that time, it was less than 7 billion. Now it's over 7 billion. But let's just call it 7 billion. If you were to go out and interview these people, and because there's been sophisticated survey on this, 4.9 billion, that's a lot of people, would say that they are not a Christian. Like if you were to ask them, are you a Christian? They would say, definitely not. Some would even say, I don't even know who Jesus is. But they would certainly say, I'm definitely not a Christian. Well, inside of that, 2.1 billion would self-identify themselves as a Christian, which doesn't mean that they are, but they would say, yes, I am a Christian. So let's go ahead and give them that tag that they are. But 4.9 are not. How many is that? To put it in perspective, on September the 11th, 2001, 2,996 people died in just a moment. If you were to put them chest to back, toe to heel, single file, and stretch them out in a line, the line would go from here all the way to the big bridge. Leaving out the center word like Michelle, she refuses to say the center word. Okay, the big damn bridge. There you go. That's how many people 2,900 plus is. There was a story as well that you know about in 2004, the tsunami hit. And when it hit, 250,000 people died that day. How many is that? Well, those that are in Conway, you could actually expand the line. If you put them in single file from chest to back and just toe to heel, it would stretch out from where you are in Conway to here right now. 250,000 people. But what about 4.9 billion? If you were to put them in single file the same way and stretch them toward Atlanta, would it reach Atlanta? Yes, it would go all the way to Atlanta. Then it would pass that and continue all the way to the East Coast. You would have to build a bridge and then head towards Africa and Europe. It would continue to go through the stands, through the Middle East, all the way to Asia. You'd have to build a bridge around North Korea and keep going. You'd pass below Russia, maybe a quick phone call to the Ukraine, and then a wave to Putin, and then keep going. But no joking aside, it would actually go through the Pacific Ocean, past Hawaii and California, all the way back to this stage. And the first person would be able to turn around and shake hands with the last person. And then the line would continue. But not 2 times, and not 4 times, and not 10, and not 20, and not 25 now. Now it would be about 37 times around. If you want to know what the Lord is thinking about, He's thinking about those. We live in a community where there are people on every one of our streets who do not know the Lord. Jobs that God has given you, with people who are there who do not know the Lord. John chapter 4 and verse 35 says, "Do not say 4 months more and then the harvest. I tell you, open your eyes and look at the fields, for they are ripe for harvest." Could you look here? He's saying, please don't say one day I'm going to catch on to this. No, now. The things about the church we need to know. Number one, reaching the lost is a biblical mandate for the church. Romans 10 verse 13 says, "Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. How then can they call on the one they have not believed in? And how can they believe in the one of whom they have not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them?" The most important thing a church or even a Christian can do is to get lost people saved. Why? Could you look here? Because someone can still go to heaven with a bad marriage. They can still go to heaven with a bad attitude. Someone can still go to heaven when their kids are wayward or their kids are out of control. But no one can go to heaven without knowing Jesus. And you'll never understand and never enjoy this church. In fact, if you don't get that, you're never going to enjoy this church. You're going to look around. I don't like the coffee. It's not as good as it used to be. Too cold in here, which is really true. The worship is too loud or whatever it might be. I don't understand why they're doing this and that. What we're doing is trying to win souls. The first 2 churches I went to, they never won anyone to the Lord. First one was legalistic. It was like no one ever I don't ever remember anyone responding to the altar call. The next church I went to, that one was very legalistic. I've told you about that. But the next church I went to was just like all about the experience. Like everybody waving flags and running all over the church, which was exciting. The first church, it was so boring. It's like I felt like I got points from heaven just to sit through the service. And this one was not boring, but then I had a friend. His name is John, and I prayed for John. I wanted John to give his heart to the Lord. It's like, Lord, I want John. I need a friend. I don't have a friend to hang out with. I want John. So I prayed for John, then I called John and witnessed to John. John he was not interested at all. He thought I was crazy. But I kept trying. And one day John called me. He goes, "Man, I'm going through a difficult time. I want to give my heart to the Lord." I was like, "What?" And he goes, "And I want to come to church with you." And I said, "Man, I never said anything about coming to church. Like, I don't want you to come to church," because the church I was in, I knew he wouldn't like it. Well, he came. 10 minutes into it, he left. I still talk to John, but he's still not serving the Lord, the best that I can tell. John chapter 14 and verse 6. And by the way, I think somewhere in that moment, the vision for the way that we do church arrived. And it's just one little local church, New Life. Other churches understand the importance of this. But I thought, why can't we have a church where I'll bring a friend? Jesus answered, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If this is true, should we live like it's true? Back to the book of Acts, the early church, Acts chapter 1 and verse 8. But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you. Be honest, how many of you would like to have the power of the Holy Spirit around you? Come on. But what's it for? Well, let's keep reading. And you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. That's what it's for. Something else we should look at. Heaven and hell are realities. When we started our church, I just remember, this is a good picture, okay? Most people who come to New Life Church are unchurched before they come. Maybe they grew up in a church, but they just got somehow disconnected. But sometimes we'll have somebody come from another church. It's not who we aim at, but we don't kick them out. I mean, it just happens sometimes. Well, in the early days when we were small, this was normal. People would come to our church, and I just want you to get this. We're a small little church. You would think I would be happy when someone would just show up at our church, but they would come to our church and they would say, hey, I'm coming to this church now. The church I was at just got too big. And so I'm leaving there. I want to come to this small church. And you would think I would just say, glad you're here. But it was like, what was too big about it? Was too many kids in the line to check in? Too many marriages being healed? Too many people in the parking lot? Like, was too many people in the park? Too many people getting baptized? So too many people giving their heart to the Lord? Too many people addicted to drugs or getting set free? What do you mean, too many people? And they're looking at me like, dang, maybe we should try another church. If heaven and hell are real, there's no such thing as too many. You ever drive by a hospital and look at it and go, no one ever drives by a hospital and says, man, that place is way too big. They're helping way too many sick people. Well, raise your hand if you're sick people. The church is like a hospital. So when we moved here, I told this story, and I'm telling you now. Suck it up if you heard it before. Haley, when she was 4 years old, she saw a Hallmark movie with her mom, not with me. Proud of it. Two kinds of movies. You got good movies and Hallmark movies. But she was watching this, and then when she saw it, it was a girl running away from home, so she goes, I want to run away from home, but I don't want to do it in the day because my mom and dad always watch me, so I'm going to have to do it at night when they're sleeping. So she packed a wagon. It's kind of a long story. She packed a wagon. We're sleeping in the middle of the night. She left with that wagon. She had her dolls in that wagon and Skittles and stuff like that. She left our cul-de-sac. We were asleep. Went to the end of the road, took a right, a left, all the way to a 4-lane highway. It's about at this time that anybody with kids is starting to hyperventilate. She was in her nightie, walking down that road, pulling a red wagon. Shell and I were sleeping. A lady saw her and pulled over and said, hey, what are you doing? She goes, I'm running away from home, and it's so much fun. And she said, is everything okay at home? Yes, ma'am, I'm just having fun. I'm on an adventure. She said, get in the car. I'm going to take you home. No, ma'am, I'm not allowed to ride in a car with a stranger. But you can walk freely up and down this road. Your family's got weird ideas. So Haley came home. That lady followed her all the way home. We thanked her. But if Haley wouldn't have returned, we'd still be living in that cul-de-sac in Zachary, Louisiana. I'd still have a landline, just waiting for the phone to ring. And I would pick my friends based on who was helping me find my lost little daughter. There would be nothing in the world more important to me than finding friends who would help me find her. And thus you have the church. Let's not forget the Great Commission. I think it's very important that you understand this because, the next point, because of inviting unchurched people to a life-giving church service is still an effective method. Now, I just want to talk about this for a second. Born Institute, we first started our church. I noticed that there are 30 million people in America who used to go to church regularly, and they still love the Lord, but they're not going to church now. And so they went out and investigated. I'm not going to speak long on this, but when we first started our church, I saw this study and was like, yeah, One of the reasons why they don't want to go to church anymore is because the kids don't want to go. We live in a child-centric world. People decide where to eat based on kids, where to travel based on kids, and they certainly pick churches based on kids. Do you know they got people in this room right now that hate this church? They hate the way I speak. They hate the worship. They don't even like Brand. They hate it, but they're here. Why? Because their kids like it. We also have people who are not here right now who love it here, but the kids don't like it. When you go to pick up your kids, the first question that a parent asks is, did you like it? Second question is, what did you learn? If they go, yes, I did, and this is what I learned, then that's a game changer for busy people who have put their kids in the center of their lives. Now, the reason why people say they don't go to church is because of music. Would you give it up for our worship team? I'm just thankful. Okay. Interesting enough, the biggest compliment we get as a church is our worship, but the biggest complaint is also the worship. And so it's just kind of weird, depends on. But I want to say I love hymns. I studied hymnology in college. Whew, what a blast. And but choirs, I love choirs and all that because I grew up around that. And we do have choirs that rotate around. But not many people are flipping through, lost people are flipping through the satellite radio looking for the choir channel. Another reason why they said they don't go is because the church just wants my money. I'll tell you what really hurts about that is that it's true. So as a church, when we started our church, we said, no, we want the people. We'll let God take care of the rest. Because when they say that, they're saying, you don't want me, you just want what I have. What if we had a church where we wanted you? And then you couldn't wait to give. Like you would not want to hesitate because you're connected to Jesus. Where the sermons are boring. And I know this one's a little boring, but just suck it up. And the people are weird. I don't want to go to church because the people are weird that go there. They're not like me. Hey, New Life has weird people too. We just don't let them greet at the door. That's what that black curtain is for back here. They're behind that. Hey, y'all, come on out. All right, let's just move on. I'm taking too much time. But here's the main thing in the Barna study that I wanted to show you. Listen to this. 47% of all people in America say currently that they would go to a church service with someone if they were invited. Matthew 24:12 is the Bible verse that I despise the most, although I know it's needed. But I hate this verse because it reveals to me the generation that I'm pastoring in. When it's speaking about the end times in the book of Matthew chapter 24, it says, because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold during those days. That's 51% or more. So let me show you a stat about the trend of growing cold. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take all the generations, the last 4 or so. I'm going to show you who they are, what their age is, and I want you to see how many of them were serving the Lord and how it is today. First generation, the builder generation, born 1927 and 1945. 65% of them would self-identify as Bible-based believers. If you are here right now and you were born in that slot, would you raise your hand? God bless you. Give their hand. Give them a hand. Thank you for being here, and thank you for a generation that led well, leads well. Next one is the boomer generation, born from 1946 to 1964. 35% of them would say that they are a Bible-based believer. Look at this slip. Next generation, the buster generation, born from 1965 to 1985. 16% would say that they are believers. What about the millennials? Born 1986 and 1995. In America, only 4% of that generation would say that they are Bible-based believers. I wonder what Generation Z will be like. It's the reason why we have to think about the lost. If you believe the church is the hope of the world, then let's live like it. It's certainly not politics. Try to win people to Christ through political discussion. Just go and do it. So how do you do that? Number one, we focus on a life-giving culture. I could talk to you about the two trees in the center of the garden, and tree of life versus the religious tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But basically, this is what I hope for you. When I pray for our church, I pray you don't come to church because it's good if you do and evil if you don't. I don't want to be a sinner, so I go to church. Listen, if that's your mind, I grew up in that, I understand it. But there's another way. Come to church every time you can, because the Spirit of God is here, and He gives you life for that week. Don't read the Word because it's evil if you don't, and righteous if you do. Read the Bible because it gives you life, and you need that strength to carry out your walk with God. Don't avoid a movie because it's evil. Avoid a movie because you don't want to do anything that grieves the Holy Spirit that has saved you, that is inside of you. You want to walk with Him and be close to Him. And when you blow it, turn and give your life to Him again. Not because it's good if you do and evil if you don't, because He gives you life. John 14:15 says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. Church I grew up in, I thought, if you love God, you'll do it right. Love God, you'll do it right. But now I've learned, if you love Him, you will. It's like with Michelle. I've described it this way to you guys. Michelle, I love Michelle. Give it up for Michelle. Woman's coming up this week. Boy, they've been praying. It's going to be good. But when I married her, can you imagine what kind of marriage we'd have had 31 years if this was it? Every day, be good to Michelle. Don't commit adultery. Don't look anywhere else. Don't commit adultery. Just don't commit adultery. Don't commit adultery. Just don't look around. Just don't commit adultery. That's the goal. Or I can just fall in love so much with her that I don't want anybody else. We can do that with Jesus too. Number two, to create services with the unchurched in mind. Listen, we know that this is a believer service. We're a church. But we have unchurched people that are everywhere, and we can't forget about that. Parking lot attendants outside. Why do we have them? You know where to park. In a spot. Then why are we out there? Because we're trying to just be nice, to serve. Keep you from flipping off one another in the parking lot. I'm a very confident person. I can speak to thousands of people. For some reason, it doesn't intimidate me. But if Michelle and I are on vacation and we were to visit a church, I'm nervous. I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know where to park. I don't know if it's a cult. I don't know where the bathrooms are. I've been to a church service before where they made all the visitors stand while the members stayed seated. And then they said, tell us your story. Like, I don't want to. Last weekend, we had a surgeon in our church taking out garbage. We asked him why. He said, because people are getting saved here. So how do we have a life-giving culture? And how do we have a life-giving culture that reaches the lost? Number one, to be authentic like Jesus. Hebrews tells us, let us draw near to God with a sincere heart. Look, as a pastor, it's the same way. You ever had somebody over to your house and they're just normal? You ask them to bless the food, and you know they're a Christian, so you ask them to bless the food, and then they go vibrato on you. Like, Lord God, or whatever. And you talk to them about the Lord, and they squint their eyes like they're holy or something. How many love that? You know, we all want to be around someone who's authentic. But a lot of pastors don't know that we can do that because we were taught in Bible school for years that you can't be close to people. This is what they taught us. Don't get close to people. You're the anointed one. It's just you pray it through. You can't get close to people. Sit in a chair on the stage away from everyone. If you're going through a difficult time, just plow your way through. Just you and God. Ministry is lonely. I would raise my hand and say, I can't have any friends. Not in ministry, you can't. It's lonely and painful, and you're going to hate it. They didn't really say that, but that's what I heard. So I went into ministry and got married. Michelle and I had a horrible marriage. We'd go into small groups and we'd be arguing. I remember one time arguing on the way to small group, and we walked in and it was like, man, no one knew. We walked in and I was acting normal. And someone said to me, man, I wish we had a marriage like you do. And I was like, no, you don't. No one knew. During that first year, a girl committed suicide, trying to give her advice. And she said, you're not really depressed. I understand depression now. I've personally never been depressed, but I understand it now, but I didn't then. And I said to her, I don't really think you're depressed. I think you're just here to hang out with Michelle and I. And I hate this story because she went home and she killed herself. The problem is that story is sad. The other part of the story is that I died that day. And the other part of the story is no one knew. Because I have the ability to fake my relationship with God. And so do you. And if you live that way, you're going to hate this thing called Christianity. You need somebody to see what's going on the inside and somebody to pray with you. Jesus was authentic. He even said, my God, he's dying on the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? By being relevant like Jesus. That's another job. Look, from time to time, a pastor will have this happen. I want you to think about it. Maybe some of you, raise your hand if you grew up in church. But raise your hand if you didn't. There's some people that are in this room right now. It happens. It happens a couple times to me. They'll come to you and talk to you, say, hey, I love the way you was teaching. And when you put something on the screen every now and then, I want you to get this. It's like somebody's name and then the numbers by it. Like, what is that? And then you read from it. And then I was like, are you kidding? Not now I don't, but back in the day. Oh, that's the Bible. Okay, what's the name for? Oh, well, a lot of times in the Bible, when someone wrote the book, they would call it that person's name. Well, what's the numbers for? Well, years ago, they decided to put the numbers in chapters and verses so you could find it better when you're teaching. Oh, is that what the dot is for in the middle? Yes. Did you come up with that idea? Yes, I did. Listen to me. There are people that are in this church even now who you're going to bring here. And they don't know what the dot is, man. By being enjoyable and inspiring like Jesus. People love to be around Jesus. Children and sinners. He was God, but the ungodly would be around him. He was holy, but the unholy people would be around him. He never compromised the truth, though. He spoke the word without compromise. Because you can't love somebody if you water down the word. Psalms 122:1 said, I was glad when they said to me. I think church should be a place where there's some joy, especially if you're hurting. Let us go into the house of the Lord. It says, I was glad when they said unto me. It doesn't say I was mad when they said unto me. And I was sad when they said unto me. People come in here sometimes and they'll go, training some pastors, and they'll say, man, you let people bring coffee into the sanctuary of God? What are you going to do if they spill it? We're going to clean it up. Some of our churches remind us of people who have plastic on their couches. It's a blast to go over there, huh? You're welcome, but not really. By being accepting, but with strong conviction like Jesus. That's why I wrote the book, Real Love in an Angry World. Listen, I go through social media sometime, and I'm extremely disappointed in the way a lot of you live in social media. And I just want to rebuke the fire out of you. You're losing all of your influence because you're not willing to walk over and have coffee with someone. You just want to yell over at everyone. You're all about truth and no grace. There's another group of you, it's all about grace. You accept everything, no truth. We have to have truth and grace. Truth is harder to tell when the culture gets dark. But it's still important to tell the truth. The whole truth. And nothing but the truth. So help me God. And then grace. You have to have both. If you ask God, what's the holiest nation in the world? He would say, Israel. You would say, well, what's the holiest place in Israel? He would say, the city of Jerusalem. And if you would say, what's the holiest place in Jerusalem? He would say, it's the temple. What's the holiest place in the temple? He would say, the Holy of Holies. If you were to say, what's in there? The Ark of the Covenant. His power. What else is in there? His mercy seat. I just want to let you know, the holiest place of God, there's mercy there. So as you grow in your relationship with the Lord, do not forget about the mercy of God. Because none of us can go to heaven without His grace and His mercy. Can I have an amen? Last thing is by seeking His presence or the presence of God like Jesus. In His presence is fullness of joy. I just want to say this real quick. Could y'all look here? Some of you, it's awkward for you during worship. You don't know what to do with your hands. You don't know what to do with your words. It's just awkward for you. Especially guys who just came out of the woods. You got your camo on. It's like, I'm not really in a singing mode. But I'm going to tell you one thing you need to know. You were probably created to hunt because it's a hobby you like. God probably gave you a desire to go out and play golf or whatever it is your hobby is. But I'm going to tell you the biggest thing that God has given you is a desire to praise His name. And all of hell is trying to get in the way of that. There's 7 Hebrew words. I'm not going to teach them now. But it talks about exactly how you worship. One is you clap. Other is you sing. In fact, right now, no screaming or singing or yell. Just clap to the Lord. All you people. Clap to the Lord. Come on, everybody. It's okay to do that. I don't know why He likes that. But He does. And if He likes it, then we do it. He says to shout to me, to lift up your hands and worship me, to be exuberant in worship, to bow down. The presence of God is very important to a church. And it gets a little awkward for some because you haven't been around it much. Just go in a little deeper. You need it. How's it going without it for you? So years ago, I would do a lot of marriage counseling, and honestly, I wish I still got. I don't do it much anymore. I don't have the space, but I loved it. And but I noticed that if I would just meet with them and counsel them, it was like a lot of war and rumors of wars. So what I'd have them do is meet down in the prayer chapel for a whole hour before I would meet with them. Single people when they would come to meet with us, or married people, I'd just have them meet in the prayer chapel. I didn't really know what was going to happen when I said to do it, but it was not uncommon for me to go down and get that couple who hates each other. I walk into the prayer chapel, they've been praying for an hour, and say, hey, it's time, come on up. Get away. Just get away from us. Don't interrupt. This is the first time we've been in the presence of God in our marriage. And that's the reason why we do church. We want you to get in the presence of God. It changes lives. I need it. I can't tell you how many times I've been exhausted or frustrated or mad at one of you. But I get in the presence of God, it's like I don't even remember it. Because I'm created to worship the Lord. So let's worship Him in spirit and in truth. Can I have an amen? Let's bow our heads. Come on.